Our next conversation tonight is with Democratic State Representative-elect Tim Hernández, who was selected by a Democratic vacancy committee over the weekend to represent Northwest Denver in the state ledge. Congratulations.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. I appreciate you, Kyle.
What message do you think the committee, Denver Democrats, are sending with your selection?
I think with my selection, the voters of HD4 chose to elect somebody from the neighborhood who's a teacher, who's a Chicano, and who represents the values of our neighborhood and our shared place. And more importantly than that, I'm a young person, right? I'm 26 years old. I'm now officially the first representative elect of Gen Z in the entire Colorado House. And so I think Democrats put forward a message that says that we're ready for young, bold leadership to lead and push us on our values.
About those values,
yeah.
All right? You're a progressive. We're about to hear some of the other names that people call you. Are your values lined up with the Colorado Democratic Party's values?
They are. Yeah, I'm deeply in line with not just Colorado Democratic Party, but Denver Democratic Party, right? Both of which are very strong on unions, collective bargaining, making sure that we can raise wages, that we can fight for workplace protections for folks that aren't in a union, right? I'm also in line with those platforms when it comes to things like education, against corporatized charters, and building, fully funded, thriving public schools in every neighborhood, regardless of zip code. And I'm also both of those platforms say and write and commit to the idea that housing is the only solution to what we're facing right now, that we need to build affordable housing, we need inclusionary zoning, and that we need to make sure that folks can remain in their homes with renter protections. And so I've been involved with the Dem Party for a long time. I'm really thankful that, my work in the Dem Party led me to this place, and those values are important to me, and I'm excited to practice them in the state led.
You can keep teaching while you're in the legislature?
I am, yeah. I'll, right now, I work for CU Denver. Last year, I was teaching at a public school, and a professor approached me and asked me to run a Pathways to Teaching program, which is a concurrent enrollment, free credit class for students of color and marginalized students to study pre-service education to become teachers. And so, obviously, a lot of my backstory is in increasing and diversifying the teaching profession in the state of Colorado. This program was fantastic. The professor, Dr. Margarita Bianco, offered me an opportunity to offer it at my school last year, and she thought I was going to get 15 kids, and then we got over 60 kids to take a concurrent enrollment class after school on Thursdays. And so she asked me to come onto her team this year and help not just teach in Aurora, but I'll also be teaching at Urban Peak, which is a school for unhoused students, and a couple other schools facilitating pre-service education to encourage black and brown kids to be teachers.
You're going to be one of the more progressive legislators in the Colorado House. And last session, a lot of progressives were frustrated with Democratic leadership for what they felt was too cautious of an approach, too much deference to the small Republican minority. Representative Elizabeth Epps called the legislature a godforsaken, soul-crushing den of hypocrisy. Is that how you see it from the outside, stepping in?
Yeah, I mean, my soul is uncrushed as of yet, right? So there's moving piece there, but I think that the assessment that the Democratic Party with a Democratic trifecta, right? We're one of the few states in the country that has a Democratic trifecta of government. And that means that we should be pushing our political power. We should be pushing our values, right? Last session was one of the most progressive sessions on gun violence prevention. We passed some of the laws that we've been struggling to get across the line for a long time, and we passed it because of progressives. But what we saw happen in reaction to that is even when we pass good progressive laws, right, there are folks in our justice system that are going to work to file injunctions, like Justice Brammer, who is filing an injunction against raising the age from 18 to 21, right? There are folks that are going to work against the good laws that we pass. And so I do hear a lot of the sentiments, and I validate a lot of the frustrations that folks feel, because right, if we have every political opportunity, we should be doing the best that we can for working class folks, for poor folks, and we should be passing every policy to make sure that we can improve the conditions of the folks in our neighborhoods. But I also think that, I'm a community organizer, right? And that means that we work with folks that are on our team and ready to go and are willing to come to every event that we post about and every event that we coordinate. And there are folks that aren't. And so I think, my skills as a grassroots community organizer and being able to work with folks who disagree with me, who agree with me, who are somewhere in between, is going to yield good experience. I always make the joke, all of the best teachers in the country are community organizers, right? We organize 35 students at a time, to get them to read a chapter in class or to get them to understand a fundamental equation in math. But to pass a law in the state legislature, you need to organize 35 votes. And so I'm really excited to take not just my experience in teaching, but in community organizing to lead on our progressive values so that we can push our political power to the place that our communities are asking us to go.
So it's not every day that the selection of a state legislature makes the Fox News channel, but you made Fox News channel.
So I heard.
Here it is. Marxist teacher who called for forceful cultural revolution lands seat on state legislature. So let's unpack that. Are you a Marxist?
I'm not a Marxist. I'm against oppression, right? And I think that there's a variety of political ideologies that align with that, right? But that is also a democratic value, that we are against oppressive policy, that we are in favor of lifting the oppressed and building conditions where the oppressed are not oppressed anymore, right? That poor kids don't just go to poor schools, that poor kids go to fully funded schools just like every other school, that people that are unhoused have the right to housing just like millionaires have the right to buy their second, third, and fourth homes, right? And I think for me, it really falls on the line of I'm fundamentally opposed to oppression. And I'm fundamentally against oppressive policy because we have passed oppressive policy. That's how we arrived at the consequence of an unjust society today. And I think part of my job as a state legislator now, and part of what I've always seen my job as a teacher, is to fundamentally unpack oppression and to fundamentally reinvest in solutions that yield an opportunity of freedom for people in community.
You've called for forceful cultural revolution against whiteness and white supremacy. What type of force do you think will be necessary? And describe this cultural revolution you foresee.
Yeah, I think when we talk about social movements, right, I think it's important to first ground in how white supremacy operates, right? White supremacy is a lot of people attribute to our systems, to our histories, to our cultures, right? But more than anything, they are a culture, right? White supremacy is a culture. That's why black students are, make up less than 14% of the preschool population, but over 47% of the students that are suspended, right? White supremacy is a cultural notion, and I know because I'm a teacher, and I work with teachers who fundamentally uphold white supremacy because it is a cultural consequence, right? And so when I talk about, a forceful cultural revolution, right, and I think there's, adjectives in there that kind of yield and maybe catch people off guard, right? But I think it's important to remember we're not going to legislate our way out of white supremacy. It's going to take cultural movements to commit to reinvesting in the dignity of black and brown communities, to upend systems that consequentially and for no reason benefit white people, and making sure that we can envision a society that is a multiracial democracy, right? I'm a member of Gen Z. I'm the first Gen Z in the Colorado State Legislature. But what that means is that I fundamentally understand what a multiracial, multi-ethnic society in Colorado looks like, right? 53% of students in Denver public schools are brown. 55% in Aurora are brown, right? And when we look and layer on students of color, not only do students of color make up the majority of public school students across the country, right? But in Colorado, it is increasingly becoming an important, way that our demographics are shifting, that if public school students are majority students of color, then that means there'll be majority of workers. That means there'll be majority of voters. That means that we are about to experience a fundamental demographic shift in our country. And if we are still upholding white supremacy, we are not going to have systems equipped to provide for the resources and opportunities that the communities that are not accessing opportunity right now have. Right? It's important to me to unpack the systems that are inhibiting us from creating the opportunities for a multiracial, multi-ethnic cultural democracy. And to me, that does mean that we have to take white supremacy head on. It means that we have to invest in cultural opportunities to divest from white supremacy and more importantly, create conditions for black and brown communities to thrive.
Forceful cultural revolution. Physical force?
I think physical force, some folks in their politics align to their role. Unfortunately, I don't see my role as a physical forcer, right? Like I'm a teacher. I don't believe in physically forcing anybody to do anything, right? My job as a teacher is not even to tell students what to think about white supremacy, to think about cultural revolution. My job is to give students a full set of information and to ask them to decide. Right? That is what I mean. When we talk about forceful cultural revolution, we have to give everybody the full force of choices so that we can choose what culture, what society we're going to be investing in. And to me, right,
some people see forceful and they think violence.
Yeah. I understand where that comes from, right? And I think, it's also important to remember that white supremacy is upheld by force right now, right? That's how our systems operate. That's why, kids in the north and west side of Denver go to schools that are underfunded. That's why we're struggling for housing. That's why students are afraid to die in schools because of gun violence, because of white supremacy. Look what just happened in Jacksonville, right? And to me, right, it is a force that is driving white supremacy. Now, there's a conscious kind of question that folks ask a lot of times. You know, I think we often relegate white supremacy as a passive practice, as a passive cultural practice. But we can't just point and say, oh, well, like, it's a system's fault. It's a system's fault. Systems are upheld by people, just like us.
And
right?
you said that you can't de-individualize that process, that individual people have to take responsibility.
Individual people have to take responsibility for their roles in a system and commit to creating a system that works for a multiracial ethnic democracy.
Yeah. I mean, here's the deal. You're on the Fox News Channel homepage because people think that you were advocating for some kind of violent cultural revolution. And you said, violence isn't my bag.
No.
But do you think that it is necessary or acceptable?
I'm not here to police protest. You know, I think that folks who choose to relegate towards violence is a personal political decision for themselves. And I think that what that arrives at, and often is never people's first choice, right? Martin Luther King says the riot is the language of the unheard. Right? And I think that as a state legislator, I'm looking forward to creating opportunities to hear communities, because hopefully we can prevent any form of forceful cultural violence, right? I'm not interested in forcing anybody to change themselves again, but I do think that it is our job to force our society to look at the full set of information so that we can make the best educated decision about what society we would like to uphold in the future.
So you've said a number of times, can't legislate your way out of white supremacy in your view. Congrats, you're now a state legislator. So what are you going to do in that role in service of your goals?
Yeah, I think a byproduct of white supremacy is that majority of public school students in Denver public schools, Aurora public schools, and a lot of schools across Colorado are students of color. And the budget stabilization factor has divested from education over $330 million over the last 20 years, right? I'm a member of an educational generation in Colorado that never received a fully funded day of education ever. Right? Because we took from it every single year. And so last year, the state legislature, we brought down the budget stabilization factor by $150 million, but that's not even halfway. We have $180 million to go. I'm ready to get in there and make sure that our public schools can be fully funded. But I also think that that's the start of the conversation. Once they're fully funded, that's 1993 levels of full funding, right? We're at a very different educational place. I want to increase our funding for public schools. And I think ultimately, when we look at the consequence of public schools, there's two byproducts that lead to student success, right? One is funding. The other side of it is teachers, right? And I'm really interested in creating legislation that prevents teacher attrition right now. For those that don't know, we're in the middle of a teacher shortage where teachers aren't just leaving their schools, teachers are leaving their entire profession, right? And it's because of what we're describing with Fox News and the way they're treating teachers and the ways in which we are being villainized. But I really think that the important role of a state legislature is to work on dismantling oppressive conditions, right? And right now, not all teachers in the state of Colorado have the right to a union. Not all teachers have the right to a plan period. Not all teachers have the right to release. Not all teachers have the right to dignified class sizes that are manageable and safe, right? And so to me, as a state legislator, part of working towards dismantling oppressive systems is implementing policies that guarantee the dignity of experience for Black and brown people. Right now, those are the students in our schools. As it shows up in community, I'm excited to jump into the housing crisis, the housing fight, right? Because there are 1,500 folks sleeping on the streets of Denver right now, 30 of whom have died since July 17th when the mayor took office, which means that we need to build housing. We know it. We need density. But the way that we're going to get there and the way that we're going to make sure that poor folks, Black and brown folks, can access that is through things like inclusionary zoning, making sure that every new development has a certain threshold that must be affordable and remain affordable. The way that we get there permanently is investing in things like community land trusts, right?
Dems didn't have the votes to pass that last session.
The
governor wanted to do it, and Democrats didn't hold tight on it. It came apart.
Yeah, I think you're referencing 213, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the governor had a good idea of a bill, right? And I think, but I think what's really important as we are looking at increasing density is we have to do it in stride at the same time as anti-gentrification and anti-displacement policy. That's why I describe inclusionary zoning. That's why I describe community land trusts. We also need to make sure to prevent displacement. Folks need renters protections, right? Local municipalities need the opportunities to stabilize their own rents. We need to make sure that we have just cause eviction in the state of Colorado. And if people are evicted, we need to make sure we have expanded eviction defense funds so that folks who are poor and cannot afford a lawyer to prevent their eviction have the same access to the law as everybody else, right? And it's not to say that, passing one policy would have fixed it all either. I don't think that's how it works either, right? I think it's going to take a combination of solutions to meet the demands of crises in our communities. And I'm excited to jump into my ideas. I'm excited to jump into other ideas. And I'm excited to see where they bleed between to arrive at a good place of progress for our communities.
Last question for you. Due to your age and your work as a teacher and your work as a community organizer, you have a level of proximity to groups of young people in the community that a lot of folks at the state capitol don't have. Mm-hmm. Do you see or hear a disconnect between what young Coloradans are talking about and are concerned about and where you see attention being focused at the state level?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Every young person that I've ever met, ever taught in a classroom, ever met at a rally, ever organized with, ever worked with, is fundamentally afraid to die in a school, right? And that's a really important issue because last year there was an assault weapons ban that went up in the state legislature. Every young person I've ever talked to is in favor of an assault weapons ban. But folks at the state legislature didn't want to pass it. It died in committee on its first vote, right? And so I think that there's a way that young people are at a precipice, right? I'm the first Gen Z in the state of Colorado, right? But what I think is important about my candidacy, what I think is important about the generational shift in politics we're about to experience is that, and ultimately, like honestly, the reason that I ran is because as a young person, I experienced the struggles of our community because of the results of political decisions, right? I knew what displacement was. I went to 7 schools in 7 years because the state didn't do enough to prevent displacement. I went to underfunded schools because the state chose to divest from education. I went to schools where I was afraid to die in a classroom because the adults wouldn't be bold enough on gun violence. Now, young people are becoming the adults. Young people are now the adults in the room. And now we're asking the critical questions of, are we going to uphold the same unjust society that we just lived through? Are we going to keep asking students to prepare to die in a classroom because adults won't be bold enough on gun violence? For folks like me, it's unacceptable. For folks like me, I'm fundamentally committed to making sure that young voices are represented at the Capitol because I hope that, and I would even give like a direct message to all of my future colleagues, right? That regardless of how you feel about me, regardless of how you feel about my opinions or my work, right? I really, really, really think that it's important to remember that I am the first person of a generation, right? And if you don't want to work with me, that's fine, right? But what's important is that there will be more young people after who take these seats, who have these values, who work towards these policies. And so there's a way of either you can choose to work with our generation, or our generation will work to make sure that we can work with ourselves.
Democratic State Representative-elect Tim Hernández, thank you for your time. Appreciate it very much.
Hell yeah. Thanks so much. I appreciate y'all.